kind of live in the courtroom, like judges and lawyers who are comfortable. So don't worry about that. But obviously, if you feel that your ability to understand everything might be impaired, how much of the concepts of law that I told you about were you able to kind of understand?
I don't know.
Half, do you think?
Probably,
Half,
yeah.
do you think? Okay.
Probably, yeah.
This case might also involve some
Probably.
fairly. This case might also involve some fairly. This case might also involve some testimony, things like that. Do you think that would be a problem for you to understand all that?
It will be a problem, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I think that maybe, given the fact we're going to have some fairly technical language regarding from witnesses and that, and your concern, I don't want you worrying about it, certainly during a trial. So, given the length and nature of this trial, I'm going to excuse you from this jury panel, and you'll be excused from all other cases, so you won't be called up for another case.
Okay.
Unless years from now we send you a summons.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. That was your 117 for cause. All right, this is juror 118. All right, come on up here. Morning. You are juror number 118, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Before we do anything else, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. You can raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. First of all, since there's plexiglass in front of you, plexiglass between us, the lawyers have plexiglass where they're going to be examining you from, and it's quite a distance on top of that. And so the question for you is whether or not you want to remove your mask. Totally up to you.
Okay.
If it's more comfortable, or that'd be great.
Sure.
And if you feel like you have to put it back on, I'm going to keep mine on.
Okay.
So if that works, also mask or no mask, if you could keep, that's actually probably perfect as far as
Okay.
distance to the microphone.
Okay.
Okay. A couple questions from me first. First of all, you filled out the questionnaire, which gave us a lot of good information, so thank you for doing that. Was everything true on the questionnaire?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And you've already got the one thing you knew to follow up with yes after the mm-hmm. The court reporter's taking everything down, so if we can stick to kind of yes and no,
Okay. Yeah.
that'd be great. And don't worry about interrupting with affirmations as someone's asking you a question. Just wait for it to come, answer the question. It's a little more formalized than a normal conversation, and I apologize for that, but we got to make sure that everybody doesn't talk on top of each other so the court reporter can take everything down. Okay?
Perfect. Okay.
Excellent. And you see I'm the worst at interrupting anyway, so don't worry about it. Just give it your best shot. Are there any changes or additions to the questionnaire?
Not that I know of right now.
All right, and that's a very broad question, but we do recognize that in the last couple months since you filled this out, in reflection, you may have thought, well, I should have added this, or I forgot about this, or something you wrote was inaccurate, or maybe even an opinion has evolved. The bottom line being, I want you to feel comfortable giving answers that are different from the questionnaire. As long as they're honest, that's what we want, okay? Also, it's been about a couple months. We told you not to read any newspaper articles, stay away from the media about this case. But given the saturation of the news media with this case, were you inadvertently exposed to any information about this case or related cases, anything like that?
Nothing new that I haven't already known.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anything about related cases, like civil cases, anything like that?
No, just most recently the settlement, but that was the only thing that I've actually heard.
And what do you recall about the settlement?
The only thing that I know about it is that it was 27 million.
Okay.
But that's all I didn't read up on it or have any other information on it.
Just saw the passing headline or
Yeah.
news? Yeah.
Yep.
How do you think that's going to affect you as a juror in this case?
I don't necessarily think it would because I don't know anything about it. I just saw the number and that was it.
Like, for example, in answer to whether you can be fair and impartial, it's a little more wordy than that, but whether you can be fair and impartial, you said, I believe I could.
Mm-hmm.
Well, lawyers are going to press you a little bit about yes or no, can you be? But I'll leave that to them. My question is, has hearing about that settlement moved you one way or the other?
No.
Okay.
No.
You understand that's a different case, different laws, civil case, not a criminal case, different parties, and it won't be in evidence in this case.
Correct.
Can you accept that?
Yes.
And that brings up the most important point, which is no matter what you've heard, and you've heard quite a bit, I mean, you've got a lot in there, that's okay. And you may have formed certain opinions based on what you've heard and read. But you have to put everything aside, what you've heard and read and seen, and also any opinions you might hold based on that. And just decide this case on the facts and the laws we give it to you.
Correct, yes.
Do you think you could do that?
Yes.
Okay. A little easier question. Do you recognize any witnesses on the witness list?
I did not.
Okay. And the trial length is going to be 4 weeks long, starting Monday. Could you make that work?
Yes.
All right. All right. With that, then, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson with regard to Juror 118. You may inquire.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for the time it took to fill out your questionnaire. I'd like to ask you just sort of a series of general questions first, get to know you a little better, and I'll follow up with some of your responses, okay?
Okay.
I'm not going to try to trick you. I'll read you what the question was, what you wrote, and just to refresh your recollection, okay?
Okay.
All right. So if you and I were to meet under different circumstances at a party or social event, what are a couple of things I would learn about you during our first conversation?
I was recently married in October of last year. I am a social worker. I'm contracted with Wright County. And I just recently got a dog.
A dog?
A dog, yep.
Okay. A puppy or rescue?
Puppy, yep.
Rescue puppy?
No, golden doodle puppy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You obviously had heard quite a bit about this case before you learned that you were a potential juror on this case. How did it make you feel when you learned that you were a potential juror on this case?
I guess indifferent. I wasn't excited. I wasn't sad at all. I just was, I understand it's my duty to do it. I've been a registered voter, so I knew it was coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have concerns about your personal safety, your family's safety, your COVID-19 exposure, anything of that nature?
I guess a little bit of my own safety, but at the same time, being a social worker, I've kind of always had that in the back of my mind. I've had a lot of training for that kind of thing, so it's always in the back of my mind, but nothing more intense or different than any other time.
Okay. When you came downtown and saw the current state of the government center, what was your reaction to that?
I felt very safe. No concerns, really.
Okay. When you heard the judge this morning say that we're doing what we can to protect your anonymity, how did that make you feel?
Oh, really good.
Okay.
Felt pretty good about that.
Okay. Now, at some point, when the court determines it to be safe to do so, your name will be released publicly.
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea when that will be.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that?
I have come to accept that in the same sense of my safety for the last 5 years of being a social worker, just it's always in the back of my head. So I have training and know what to look out for and things like that too. So
Okay, fair enough. So obviously in your professional life you deal with conflict in many forms, is that fair to say?
correct, yes.
How do you approach just the notion of resolving a conflict between two people?
Mostly figuring out communication that works for them. I really have to be flexible and understanding of where they're coming from, and really try and resolve conflict with them instead of trying to make things worse, in lack of a better way of saying that. But really just working with the person and coming to their level and understanding.
Do you think your approach to conflict resolution changes if you're personally involved in the conflict?
Can you clarify a little bit?
Sure. Well, let's put it this way. You understand that your job as a juror is to ultimately resolve conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is there's the obvious conflict between the state of Minnesota and Derek Chauvin.
Yes.
And that's your kind of the ultimate job, right?
Yes.
But in the jury deliberation room, sides may emerge. Right?
Yes.
One person or group of people may look at something much differently than another group.
Yes.
Right? So I guess the question is, when you talk about approaching conflict between two people or two groups of people, you have one approach. But what if you're personally invested in one of the sides of the conflict? Does that make sense?
Yes. I treat it the same way. I think I still have to come up with, I would hope that other people would listen to where I'm coming from and how I'm understanding things and talking through it with me, so that we can all be on the same page to figure out like a solution or just an answer to whatever the question may be. Hearing all sides is the most important thing in all of what I've been trained to do and everything too. Just my side too is always important.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you took a particular position on some piece of evidence or group of evidence, whatever it may be, are you the type of person who would agree just for the sake of agreement, or would you stand your ground and say, no, this is the way I see it?
No, I do stand my ground. You do have to have a strong sense of that, especially just with other people I've worked with too. There is certain conflicts that you do have to stand your ground in, but also making sure it makes sense to both parties as well, for everyone's sake. But I think it depends on what is being talked about as well. If
Right. It's hard to put it in the abstract.
Yeah.
Until
broad.
Yeah. Until you're in the situation, it's very difficult to kind of know. But,
Correct.
and that's just kind of what I'm wondering is that, you've lived your own life, you've had your own experiences, you have your own career. So in that context, can you simultaneously stand your ground and re-examine your point of view?
I believe I could, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Again, I'm assuming in your professional context as a social worker, you have encountered people you believed to be lying to you.
Correct.
How do you ascertain if someone is telling you the truth?
Asking questions, again, figuring out where they're coming from, why they believe that, or why they're thinking that way, evidence as to what that idea or thought is, and then kind of piecing it all together to see if it makes sense. And
Do you think that two people could literally be standing next to each other, observe the same event, and perceive that event differently?
Absolutely.
And what factors play into that difference in perception?
The person, where they've come from, their own experiences that they've had, their own biases that they've had. Lots of things could come through with their point of view on that.
Okay. Maybe their education or professional experience.
Correct. Yeah.
Can you think of a situation in your life where you felt you were 100% correct and only to later learn you were wrong?
Absolutely.
Okay. How do you deal with that when that happens?
I would just, I really try and understand. I try and process that information. I am perfectly able to admit when I am wrong. I really enjoy actually hearing other people's sides and hearing other people's opinions on things. I think I really like learning about other people's experiences and their point of views on things because it opens my own eyes as well.
Okay. So, you were asked a series of questions on the questionnaire, and the judge just this morning recited some basic principles of law. So, for example, the presumption of innocence. Would you have any problem applying the presumption of innocence in this case?
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure. Will you apply the presumption of innocence in this case?
Yes.
You understand that Mr. Chauvin has no obligation to prove anything. Do you understand that?
Correct.
We don't have to ask a single question, call a single witness, introduce a single piece of evidence. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
And so can you ultimately, in your opinion, hold the state to its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes.
Now, at the end of the case, you may, you'll see all the evidence, anything that comes in, all the questioning of witnesses, etc. And you understand you have to judge the case based on the evidence that's presented exclusively in this case. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And can you do that?
Yes.
All right. And will you do that?
Yes.
All right. The judge will give you instructions of law, and you may read the law. I'm assuming, again, in your work, you've confronted statutes or laws and rules, right?
Correct.
And you may read the law, and as the judge gives it to you, and you may disagree with the judge. Or you may think, we really need to change this law because this makes no sense, right? Mm-hmm. Can you apply the law as the judge gives it to you, even if you think it's wrong or you think it should be changed?
Yes.
All right. Now, I'd like to follow up on some of your answers to your questions, or to the questions on the questionnaire, and want to ask you, again, remind you I'm not trying to trick you. I'll read you exactly what you wrote and what the question was. Okay? There were several references to some videos that were publicly released. There was a bystander video, there were some body camera videos, and then there were some surveillance videos from local stores. Which of those videos do you think you've seen?
I believe I've only seen the bystander video. I don't remember seeing any body cam or any store videos at all. Okay.
And I think you said you have seen that video 4 to 5 times?
Correct.
When you say you saw it 4 to 5 times, did you come across it in the news? Did you come across it in social media? How did you first come across that video?
I have only seen it through the news.
All right.
So, yeah.
So you never went on the internet, tried to find a longer version of the video?
Correct.
Okay. And so is it fair to say that what you've seen are clips of that video? Shorter clips?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you were asked to kind of recite what you had remembered about what you had seen in the news or what you had heard about the case. And you wrote that the police were called to the store by the store owner alleging that George Floyd had used to counterfeit $20 bills. A couple of the officers, I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit because you actually gave us a longer recitation. A couple of the officers were newer on the job. You wrote that Mr. Chauvin had his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for over a minute, and there were mixed reports on whether there were drugs in Mr. Floyd's system or not. You heard a little bit about the background of Mr. Chauvin, and that Mr. Chauvin and Mr. Floyd may have worked together at one point, right?
Correct.
You'd heard a little bit of information about Mr. Floyd's family, as well as a couple of the other officers that were present, right?
Correct.
All right. Now again, what you may hear in trial may be different than what you recall hearing beforehand, right?
Yes.
And it may be inclusive of some of that information, and some of that information may have been wrong or just may not be admitted in this trial. Do you understand that?
Yes.
So with all, you had a pretty thorough recollection of some things that had happened and what you had seen. Again, can you kind of set all of that aside? Can you, basically become a blank slate, right? And judge this case exclusively on the evidence as it's presented in court?
Yes.
Okay. You were asked your opinions, or your impressions of Mr. Floyd, as well as, I know this was pertaining to all 4 officers, but you were asked your general impression of both the officer as well as Mr. Floyd. And you checked, as it pertains to Mr. Chauvin, you checked somewhat negative or neutral. And you have negative thoughts from the constant news portrayal, but I don't think the news covers everything, nor would they have time to. Can you just kind of, why did you have a somewhat negative impression of the officer to a neutral, and why would it be important to get more information?
The somewhat negative is just the constant showing of it, I think, for a while there when it first occurred, and just the reaction from the community as well. Just the constantness of that, I think, made me believe it was the somewhat negative, and the reasoning for my answer on that. But the neutral side of it was, I'm always thinking about the person and, again, where they came from, what they've been through, experienced. And my neutral side of that was that his training to do that, based on what occurred, and I didn't see the whole thing to be able to know whether that is what occurred.
Okay, so ultimately the question of police training or police practice may be a part of this trial. You're not a police officer, right?
Correct.
And I know you said you've had some training as a social worker to kind of deal with potential threats. Would you be able to kind of set aside what you may have learned and pay attention to the police practices as presented in court?
Yes.
Now, with respect to Mr. Floyd, you checked somewhat negative, neutral, and somewhat positive, and you wrote, reporting showed both good and bad. His family that he was a nice person, but also showed a history of drugs, unknown which one. I did not done my own further research. Okay. Let me ask you, in terms of your impression of Mr. Floyd, can you explain kind of, there's a wide spectrum, you kind of hit the whole spectrum there. Can you explain that a little?
I think that's part of where I come from, is always looking at every side of things. I'm always looking at why someone may have done something a certain way. His experience before with law enforcement, I thought about his family, because I saw the family so much on the news. So again, I had all kinds of thoughts on him with his past. They talked about his past with drugs and things like that. I had every emotion, I think,
right,
about him.
So perhaps this is a very overbroad generalization, but social workers tend to be empathetic people. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So I guess the question being is that, what if you don't hear anything about Mr. Floyd's past? I mean, what if you don't, in this trial, knowing what you had heard before, again, can you set that aside and listen to the evidence as it's presented in court?
Yes.
In your professional life, do you work with people who abuse or have abused controlled substances?
Yes, sometimes, not regularly. It just depends.
Okay. Do you think that if someone uses or abuses controlled substances, that makes them a bad person?
No.
Why do you think people may have that struggle?
I think it's a lot of things. It just depends on the person. I never judge a person based on that alone.
You were asked some questions about whether you had ever spoken with friends, family members, coworkers, or had any discussions online about this. You checked the box yes, and you wrote with family. So is it fair to assume you did not post any opinions on social media about this case?
I don't think, no, I've never, no.
But with your family, you wondered what caused or prompted the knee on the neck based on the training received by Derek Chauvin and all officers. And then on Twitter, you wrote that you were scared for the state of Minnesota as we were told violence was moving to the suburbs on the news.
Yes.
So you were obviously aware of the unrest that occurred after Mr. Floyd's death?
Yes.
And that caused you some fear?
Yes.
Okay. And there, you had heard some stories that it was expanding beyond the Twin Cities proper?
Yes.
Okay. Again, in terms of the training, you would understand that, again, that is a bit of a contest or perhaps conflict in this case. Do you understand?
Yes.
And would you be able to set, any of those discussions that you've had with family members or friends about what they think police training says about this incident aside, listen to the evidence from both sides and make your decision based on that?
Yes.
You were asked the question whether you believe that the community was negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place since Mr. Floyd's death, and you wrote both. Negative in the sense that people took advantage of rioting and looting, even from out of state, that affected others' livelihood, but positive in that the community has seemingly come together to make it better. So do you do you differentiate between protesting and rioting or looting?
Yes.
How do you define the two?
Protesting, making your voice heard about something that you don't agree with, hoping for positive change, and rioting, looting is taking advantage in the sense of using those discussions of wanting positive change into something negative.
Okay. You were asked ultimately if you feel that you could be fair and impartial, regardless of your opinions, and you wrote, I believe I could. So ultimately, unfortunately, I have to press you a little bit. It's we can't have equivocation. Can you? Or would you try? Or what's your sort of response?
I think that hearing both sides would definitely help, and I think I could, if both sides were being heard instead of like my constant exposure to news side, negative side all of the time. I would like to hear both sides. So yes, I think if I was exposed to both, yes.
Right. So again, Mr. Chauvin doesn't have to call a witness, doesn't have to ask a question, doesn't have to prove anything. Can you abide by that? I mean, if you want, if hearing both sides is so tantamount to you, if you only continue to hear one side, would that make it more difficult?
I think what I mean by that is that Mr. Chauvin's side is his presumption of innocence. That's what I mean by that. So yes.
You were asked a question whether you or someone close to you has ever supported or advocated in favor of or against police reform, and you wrote, family members have discussed support of both. What do you mean by that, and how does that, what was the general tenor of the conversations on both sides?
It was typically focused on training in response to situations of like mental health or things like that, having more specific mental health and not so focused on what seems like a presumption of guilt right away, that sort of thing.
Okay. There was a page where you were asked to rank your opinions from strongly agree to strongly disagree with numerous sort of broad statements. Do you recall that exercise generally?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah. And so I guess I just want to, and I know it's been a couple months since you've answered this, but I just wanted to follow up with you on a couple of questions. One of the questions was, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you checked the box that you somewhat agree with that proposition. What do you base your opinion on? Was it your training? Is it, media? Explain.
It's mostly my training, things I've been taught in college and school of minorities not having the same opportunities as in many areas, employment, education, things like that. It's mostly my training. Okay.
Do you have any personal experience, or have you had clients or friends who've sort of discussed their experiences especially in terms of the criminal justice system?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay. You were asked, or the statement reads, I support defunding the Minneapolis Police Department, and you strongly disagreed with that. Why did you strongly disagree with that?
I did not think that what I was understanding from that overall movement was basically getting rid of police in general, and I did not agree with that statement.
Okay. Has your understanding of that movement changed since you filled this questionnaire out?
A little bit, I guess. Not a whole lot, though.
Okay. So you would still strongly disagree with defunding the Minneapolis Police Department?
Yes.
You were asked a question, police in my community make me feel safe, and you somewhat agreed with that. Do you have a personal experience that has caused you to have some level of mistrust for police?
No, I think what I was referring to was I really haven't had personal experience with it, so I do feel safe with the police in my community.
Okay. You were asked a couple of questions about Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, and you had a neutral impression about both of those statements.
Yes.
With respect to Black Lives Matter, you wrote, I'm unsure. I believe Black Lives Matter as much as Latinas, police, etc. As a social worker, I was trained to support everyone no matter what, always. And with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you wrote, same as above, everyone at all ends of every spectrum matter and deserve basic respect no matter what.
Yes.
Is there anything you would want to add to that? I know that your role as a social worker is one aspect of your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Anything that you would add to your impression of either of those movements, organizations, whatever you want to call them?
I always look at the positive side of all of the movements. I think they're all great. I think it's a good thing to be supportive of everyone. I don't think one is more important than another. I think it's all equally, we should all be treated with respect and given opportunities.
Okay. So in that regard, let me ask you, if you hear testimony of a police officer, would you give that testimony greater weight or assign more credibility to it simply by virtue of the fact that the person is a police officer?
No.
Are you able to kind of look at all testimony, judge it within the context of the other testimony and the evidence?
Yes.
You indicated that you have two relatives who are nurses.
Yes.
Would you, if there were medical testimony in this case, would you call your relatives and kind of say, hey, this is what they're saying in trial, and can you tell me more about that?
No.
Okay. Now, your training as a social worker, you are trained to deal with people who are having mental health crises, correct?
Yes.
And you understand that the police may have different training than what you have. Would you be able to judge police in this case based on their training and set aside what you may have done differently in a particular situation?
Yes.
Now, lastly, you were asked, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? You checked both yes and not sure. And you wrote, mostly concerned about public information being released, including address. And then there's a reference to your career, so you said not sure if this would be so different.
Yes.
Do you think that your concerns about your personal safety have been alleviated, or do you continue to be concerned about your safety as a juror?
I think they've been alleviated.
Okay. And you understand that there would ultimately be two potential verdicts in this case, right? I mean, it's either guilty or not guilty.
Yes.
Would you allow your concerns over your over public safety or your personal safety to influence your decision in any way?
No.
I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Right.
We'll pass for counsel.
All right, Mr. Slisher.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I have a medium understanding of what social workers do, work with a few that have the title, but I need to know a little bit more specifically about what you do and what your experience has been, without naming your employer.
Yeah.
But can you just tell us a little bit more about your job on the day-to-day?
Sure. I get services in home for clients of all ages, all mental health diagnoses, all sorts of things, mental health, chemical health, kids, adults. I just make sure they have services in home to keep them safe and to be able to stay living in the community.
Are some of your clients then under some sort of a court order or involved in the commitment process?
Some of them, but it's very broad. I don't have very many at this time.
Do you have experience in the commitment process, stays of a commitment, or things of that nature?
We are not typically involved. We usually get involved after they are already on the commitment. I don't have any knowledge of the process or anything that happens before then.
Okay. And what type of services do you coordinate?
I coordinate independent living, people so that they can teach them how to be independent, go grocery shopping. I coordinate people that need assistance with getting dressed in the morning, making their meals, a lot of different services. Mental health, getting like therapists in home, things like that.
Medication monitoring?
Yes.
You coordinate that as well? Can you tell us a little bit what drew you into that line of work? Why did you want to become a social worker? I see that was your degree.
Yes. I started out and I just said I want to help people. I had a counselor in college and that is kind of where she led me. That's basically what I said, and she thought it would be a good fit, and it has been so far.
Okay. Good counselor that
Yes.
took an interest in you and it helped you find your path.
Yes.
And in your caseload, how large is it?
About 65 people.
you indicated that you have had some discussions with family members and friends about police reform, and some folks have in your circle have expressed views one way and the other. Is that right?
Yes.
So what's it like being in a conversation? Have these conversations happened at the same time, where you have different people expressing different views?
At times, yes.
What's it like being in a conversation like that?
It's very interesting, and a lot of people notice I'm very quiet. I'm a big observer in those conversations.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of police reform, what are your thoughts on police reform?
I think there are good things and there are things that should be changed, but I think the conversation is a good start of having those discussions of what's good and what should be changed for the better.
So tell me about the good things.
I think the presence of police is a good thing to have. It makes the community safe. I think their job is important, keeping the community safe in general. And I just think that I think for the overwhelming majority, it is a good thing to have.
Do you interact with law enforcement in your job? Sometimes, when people have mental health issues they're struggling with or whatnot, things can take a different turn. Do you ever have to contact law enforcement?
I used to, but not so much anymore. With being in home, I don't see those situations as often anymore. No.
In what context did you used to have to contact law enforcement?
Yes, when I was first starting out as a social worker, I worked at a facility that had court mandated. It was people court mandated to go through anger management classes, and I worked with law enforcement, and those people that were court mandated to be there a lot more often.
And describe some of your interactions with law enforcement when you've had to get law enforcement involved with clients on occasion.
Yes. If they were being unruly in the actual class, if they were saying things that were alarming, I had to be aware of those things and notify the right people.
And when you did have to notify law enforcement in those situations, can you describe how those interactions would take place?
It was mostly just explaining the situation, explaining what I was doing, and how it started, how a situation occurred. But after that, they kind of handled it from there.
And how did they handle it?
Usually removal from the class, and that was typically the most that I saw.
Did you ever see a law enforcement officer apply force or have to use force in a circumstance like that?
No.
How were they able to remove the person from the room without using force?
It was typically it wasn't a big scene. Usually they would just say, "Come with me," and usually I never saw anyone disagree.
And I take it these were favorable interactions you had with law enforcement. You had something you needed help with, and they helped you.
Yes.
And so those would be the good things with law enforcement. Why don't you share with me a little bit about some ideas you have for things that should be changed?
I guess that's hard for me to answer because I haven't seen anything personally. I haven't been through any experience personally with something that should be changed. But I guess that's hard for me to answer at this moment.
Have you ever had a conversation with someone, a client or a close friend who talked about, instances they've had with law enforcement that they believe should have been handled differently?
Yes, I'm sure I have, yes.
Do you recall any of those and what they may have discussed with you?
Yes. I'm trying to come up with something particular, but yes, I can recall.
What do you remember about that?
I remember them speeding, and they questioned it, and they openly admitted it to the police officer, and they still didn't think they should have been because it was their first time. So
I see.
Yeah, nothing major. But.
All right. Have you, in any discussions with anyone in your immediate family, heard views, strong views expressed about this particular case?
Yes.
And I guess, can you share with us what views have been expressed about this case?
I specifically to this one just have been involved in those conversations of he should not have had a knee on the neck for that long. Nothing in regards to it not happening at all, mostly for how long it was, but that was the majority of that conversation.
And this was a close family member?
Yes.
And what effect do you think, if any, that knowing that opinion, coming into this would have on you if you sat as a juror in this case?
I don't think it would affect me. It hasn't changed my view so far.
So at some point this case will be over and you would have to go back and have a conversation with your family member.
Yes.
How do you think it might affect you having to discuss whatever the result is in this case with the family member who's expressed some strong views?
I don't think it would have an effect on our relationship. My family has grown to know that where I come from, and if I'm quiet, it's usually there's a reason for that, and I don't try and enable things in a certain type of way. Yeah, my family's grown to know me from being in this for 5 years.
Are you one of those who then, if you grow quiet, I take it that might be because you're disagreeing with what's being said and you're just not voicing your opinion in that?
Not necessarily. I think it's more just I don't like to, if I can tell the other side is already elevated or something, I don't necessarily enjoy keeping it that way. So.
Do you think that you would need or find a need to have to explain or justify your decision to anyone in your close circle who may have expressed opinions about this particular case?
No, I have never felt that need in any other situation.
You indicated that you would be interested in hearing a little bit about police officers' training.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you might be interested to hear?
I think just how long that training was being given. I know I'm given trainings yearly, so is that something that is occurring every year, and just how they took that training from what they exercised. But
so when you're going through your yearly training, they're going over the same concepts, I'm assuming, pretty much every year?
yes.
Are you paying attention, or you've kind of heard this before?
What do you mean?
In terms of the training, I mean, how much of this is sinking in year after year as you're hearing it?
With my personal things,
Yes.
it's pretty sunken in there because I am learning the same things. A lot of things have not changed in my line of work.
When discussing the protests and the effects that the protest had on the community, you discussed that it was negative in the sense that some people took advantage of rioting and looting, and then you said even from out of state. Can you tell me what you meant by even from out of state?
I was referring to what I had heard on the news of there was a while they had said almost everyone that they had caught, so to speak, was from out of state.
And where did you hear that?
Just the news. I just watch the news mostly. I don't usually seek out like internet or anything like that.
Did the news say anything about what state or where these people were from, or what possible motive they would have to come from out of state and participate in rioting or anything?
Not that I remember. I remember a couple from Chicago, Illinois, but nothing else.
And you also indicated that based on news reports, you were concerned, or that raised some concern that people might be coming into the suburbs, that the rioting might spill over. Can you tell me what what you were basing that concern on.
Again, hearing it from the news that they were going to other cities coming out of Minneapolis because of the heavy police presence in Minneapolis, they were spreading out.
Okay, one moment, Your Honor. Just a few follow-up, Your Honor. You'd indicated that in your experience, when you've had to call law enforcement in and they've removed somebody who was unruly, in all instances, the person complied with the police.
Yes.
Can you tell me what your thoughts would be on someone who does not comply with the police when they, come in and on your request are trying to remove a person who's being unruly?
I think it depends on the situation. Since I've not experienced it, I'm not quite sure how I would react to that, but I would hope that I would be able to work with law enforcement like they would be able to work with me to be able to get that person to just be in a better state and feel better about anything, but I've not had that experience, so I'm not sure.
And some people may hold the view that if you're not complying with the police when they ask you or tell you to do something and you get injured, you kind of get what's coming to you. Tell me what your thoughts are.
I think I used to think that, but I don't necessarily believe that anymore. Again, because we should all have that respect. You should respect the officer telling you something as much as the flip side. So I think that's my view on that.
Can you tell me why you may have re-examined that view?
I'm not quite sure what that. I think maybe just hearing both sides again. I don't really know if there's something specific I can point out to why that changed.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. The state passes for cause.
Juror 118, you will serve on our jury. And so we're going to have you come back on Monday at 9 a.m. to start the trial. But watch for any communications from the jury office as far as logistics, and if there's been any change in the timing on this. So, any questions for me? Otherwise, the deputy will take you out. You had a letter to get in here. Make sure you keep that.
Okay.
Keep it safe and bring it with next time.
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we're going to break. Right now? Yeah. All right. It's 5 minutes to 12. We have a 1 o'clock Chambers conference scheduled, and we'll resume with jury selection at 1:30. So let's break for lunch so I give you a full hour, and we'll be back at Chambers at 1 o'clock, but in the courtroom for jury selection at 1:30. All right. Thank you. right, juror 119. This is the last from the morning, so then the next will be a group instruction. Yes, 14 of 18 and 8 of 10. That's what I have. All right. Come on up, sir. And first of all, thank you for waiting over the lunch hour. Hopefully one of the lunches that we just randomly picked worked for you.
It did, thank you.
All right. Before I turn it over to the attorneys, a couple things. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. You know what? Everybody does it.
Okay.
They mirror me, and so they raise their left. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. Now, you have plexiglass in front of you, and we have plexiglass between us. There's plexiglass in front of the attorneys from where they ask their questions, and that's pretty far away. The point being, if you want, you can remove your mask if that works for you. You can keep it on if that works for you.
Okay.
In either case, do whatever's comfortable.
Sure,
And
thank
if
you.
you feel like you want to put it back on, totally fine. No one is insulted if you do one or the other. So, but in either case, yeah, you're close enough so the microphone should work.
Great.
First of all, you filled out a questionnaire, and thank you for doing so. You gave us a lot of good information to start with.
Mm-hmm.
Was everything on that questionnaire true?
Yes.
All right. Now, when the lawyers are asking you questions, they'll probably direct your attention to certain specific questions, and they'll read it, but they'll also read your answer, not to be confrontational, but to maybe remind you what you said.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything on there that you think should be changed or added to, feel free to say so.
Okay.
It's been a few months, maybe you recall something you should have put in there, or something that wasn't accurate, or maybe even your opinions have changed.
Mm-hmm.
In any of those cases, feel free to say something that's different than what's on the questionnaire.
Okay.
Now, you were not supposed to read any newspaper articles and avoid the media
Mm-hmm.
about this case, but we know it's been pretty saturated with news coverage, so most jurors have been inadvertently exposed to some information about this case, or about related cases, civil cases, things like that,
Sure.
or pretrial matters, or other things. Anything that you were exposed to?
Yeah, by accident just on social media, I saw the amount that was given to the family.
Okay. And do you recall specifically what it was?
I think it was 24 to 27 million. I wasn't exactly
Okay.
sure. I tried to avoid it, but it was something that I saw on there, and then heard it on the radio as well.
Yeah, because it's unavoidable to some degree, and we recognize that. So it's not like, we're going to criticize you. You did your best, and still,
Mm-hmm.
it's there. With regard to the settlement, let's talk about that just for a second. How do you think that would change your ability to be a fair juror in this case?
I mean, to be strictly honest, I think it may give me some change from what I wrote the first time, that it might have me look at the case a different way since seeing that.
Okay.
And so yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, because in answer to the question whether you can be fair and impartial at number 10 in part 1, it's a much wordier version, and that's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
But it basically asking you to be fair and impartial, and you said yes. Do you think this news that you've been exposed to has moved the needle a bit on that?
Yeah, that, and just thinking about the situation more since that time.
Okay, tell me kind of your thoughts on the whole thing, how that news and anything else.
I guess the news sort of slanted me away to think that maybe there's, opinions already made up about it, and I guess it sort of swayed my opinion to hear that they got that big of a
Okay.
that much money, I guess. Yeah.
Does that maybe move you maybe off the presumption of innocence towards, well, maybe there is something there?
I mean, yes, to be honest with you, yeah.
Okay, and that's what we're looking for.
Absolutely.
You did your best to avoid it, but it's almost unavoidable. So if it moved you off being fair and impartial, that's what we want to know. And you would say the answer is yes?
Yes, yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate your honesty and all the time you've taken. And we even kept you over the lunch hour just to say this, but I'm going to excuse you from this panel.
Okay.
And so you're not going to be kept for any other cases. So
Okay.
you're done with your jury service for this round, unless we summons you in the future. Have a good day and good luck.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay. That was juror 119 for cause. I guess we can't disagree with the premise anymore.
I'm not sure. I think they're probably still watching the video, but I'll check.
Okay, they may still be watching the video, so if not, we'll bring them in. come on and take any seat. All right, thank you. You can be seated. Well, first of all, can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right. My name is Pete Cahill, and I am one of the judges of the district court, and you have been summoned as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all prospective jurors, which must be answered under oath. First, thank you for filling out and returning the questionnaire. That gives us a great deal of information to start with. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by continuing to provide full, complete, and honest answers to the questions that you'll be asked today. These questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics. After the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I will excuse others of you for what is called cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair person, and you should not take offense in being excused. I also ask that you not take any offense at any question that might be asked. We must pry, to some extent, in order to explore opinions you might hold and to hear about experiences that you have had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. The defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. In the normal course of trial, charges may be added to or subtracted from these charges, but those are the charges as it stands today. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. I'm now going to have the parties introduce themselves, and so we can ask you if you have any type of relationship with them, either friendship, acquaintanceship, or professional relationship. So, for the state.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Slisher, and I represent the state of Minnesota.
Hello, my name is Christina Marinakis, and I'm assisting with the prosecution.
I'm Joshua Larson, also representing the state of Minnesota.
Good afternoon, Aaron Eldridge for the state of Minnesota.
And for the defense.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Nelson, assisted by Amy Voss. We represent the defendant, Derek Chauvin.
Right. Anybody on the panel know any of these people, have a relationship or acquaintanceship with any of them? Okay, my hands. In addition to the Attorney General, Assistant Attorney Generals who are here today, there may be others who appear, including Matthew Frank, Jerry Blackwell, and Attorney General Keith Ellison. Anybody have a relationship with any of those people? Okay. Anybody have or know anybody from Mr. Nelson's law firm or had any dealings with his law firm? Okay. And you have been given a copy of a list of potential witnesses. I'd like you to review it because when you are questioned individually, you'll be asked if you know anyone on that list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do during jury selection is to instruct you on the law. But I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him, or because he has been arrested, or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial, unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. If you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given a witness's testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect. But in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, their relationship to the parties, their ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their age and experience, their frankness and sincerity or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. Now, there are certain things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out to do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, the lawyers or the witnesses. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, witnesses, or spectators do not speak with you. They know it would be improper to contact you except through the normal jury selection process, and they will confine themselves to a brief greeting. Now, during the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. Since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during these proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access those social media tools, but please do not publish any information about the case or your thoughts about the case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case, and do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Now, because of the nature of the case, this case is receiving media coverage. Please do not read about this case in the newspapers or online, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. If at all possible, avoid the news altogether. This trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number to protect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast, unless we need to discuss something deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing, or which is likely to specifically identify you. In those cases, I will specifically order that the audio not be broadcast, so it will only be available to the people in this room. In that case, you will still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast. So, with the exception of juror number 120, we will have you wait in the other courtroom until it is your turn to be questioned. Please feel free to use all the wipes and hand sanitizer you would like, and keep your masks on and social distance if you could. In fact, I'm going to put my mask back on. And so juror 120, please remain behind. The other two, follow the deputy, please. And juror 120, if you could come up here. Have a seat right there. Well, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
And you are juror 120. All right. First thing I'm going to do is swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. Thank you. Now you have plexiglass in front of you, and we have it between us, and also there's plexiglass in front of the lawyers who are a fair distance from you. My point being, you can remove your mask if you think it would be more comfortable or if you need it to be heard more clearly. So I'm pretty much going to leave that to you. In any case, I would ask that you're probably perfect on the microphone right there, and speak so that we can hear you clearly. Also try and avoid talking over other people. For example, you know what the question is going to be, and so you kind of finish it. Try and wait till each person is done, because the court reporter is making a record, and we have to make sure we don't talk over each other. So that would be greatly appreciated. A couple questions before I turn it over to the attorneys. First of all, you filled out the questionnaire. Thank you for doing that. Lots of good information in it. Is everything true on the questionnaire?
I believe so.
Okay. Broad general question. You'll find that the attorneys will zero in on certain questions certainly more than I do. And they will usually read the question and your answers, not to be confrontational, but just to remind you what exactly it is you wrote. You didn't keep a copy of your questionnaire, did you?
Yes.
You did? Oh, you're the third person. So we've had 3 people do that.
Was I not supposed to?
No, you absolutely could. Usually it was all
The mail was a little,
iffy.
well, so I wanted to make sure if I didn't have to fill it out again.
Okay. Yeah, but you were the third. Everybody else, nobody kept a copy. So all the lawyers do, just because that's how we're going.
I'm married to one, so.
Okay. Did you have a chance to review it before you came here?
No.
Okay, good. You may find, since it's been a few months, that things have changed. Maybe there's something you could have added, something like that. Or maybe your opinions have just changed. But in any case, I want you to feel comfortable giving an answer that is different from what's in the questionnaire, okay? That's my main point there. You weren't supposed to read any articles or and to avoid media that would be covering this case. Have you been able to do that generally?
Yes, until I saw the headline about the juror selection.
Okay. And you anticipated my next question. I think just about everybody, since it was a few months ago, and the coverage is so prevalent on this case, most jurors have said that they've been exposed inadvertently to a headline or a news blurb about the case. And so what do you remember hearing about the case since you filled out the questionnaire? Or related cases or pretrial matters or anything like that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Like,
Sure.
I understand, like, when the defendant was arrested, I knew that there was going to be a case. Is that what you were saying? Because I did hear that.
No, because you pretty much told us what you knew about the case.
Yep.
And everybody who's come in here knows.
Or like you're saying, what have I heard since then?
Since you filled out the questionnaire.
Nothing, because I've been trying really good to
Excellent.
avoid that. Like I said, the only thing I saw was when they were talking about jury selection that the headline was you were looking for a 14th and 15th juror.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, I thought we were
Thought we were
going to
done.
stop at 14 or whatever. So
Okay. Other than that, did you recall reading anything about any related civil cases or the pretrial matters involved here? Anything like that?
the Minneapolis settlement.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you recall? And I think just about everybody.
That just that there was an amount that was done.
Okay. Do you recall the amount?
$27 million.
Okay. How would that affect you sitting on this case?
I don't think it would. I mean,
Okay. And that's a good answer. If that's true, yeah, that's fine. We asked you the question, it's question number 10 on part 1, whether you could be fair and impartial. It's a little more wordy than that, but basically, could you be fair and impartial? And you said possibly, never have been in this situation before, would do my best though. And the lawyers and I are probably going to press you a little harder on that. But let's start there. You said possibly, never been in the situation, so what I take from that is you're saying, I don't know what I don't know. Is that kind of right?
Yes, to a degree, it's you're making a decision on someone's life,
Right.
you know. But two, you mentioned earlier that it was going to be that the defendant is being charged with second-degree murder and
Okay.
second-degree manslaughter.
Correct.
I have, in honesty, to try to preserve my integrity, I did not look up what the definition of those
Good.
were. So, to the fact of deciding someone's fate and not knowing what really those charges are, I don't know if I could do that because
Okay.
I don't know what those charges are.
Well, the good news is you don't have to know that because that's the law that I give you. The law at the end of the case usually is a set of instructions which includes a list of what it is the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And the jury decides, has the state proven it or have they not? All the while presuming the defendant innocent. And so, if at this point, if you had this, are you hoping for one verdict or another, or do you feel you're kind of neutral because of where you're at?
I don't think I'm neutral
Okay.
on that.
Where are you on the spectrum? Where does the needle point to?
I would say guilty.
Okay.
And the fact is, since the case has happened, this is the analogy that I've been worked with.
Okay.
That, do you have any brothers?
I do.
You do. So you're tussling with your brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
If one of your brothers says, I give up, etc., you stop, right?
Mhm.
And if you don't, something happens, you're standing before your parents, and they're said, what did you do? What happened? This is what happened to Tommy. Tommy said, stop, why didn't you stop? That's what I feel, is that like at some point, if you've had siblings that siblings or friends, you wrestle, tussle or whatever, but there's a line of where you have to stop
Okay.
when someone says no more.
Okay.
So
There are a variety of contested issues in this case, but do you think that ultimately that's always going to be there and you don't really feel you can fairly and impartially, given your life experience?
yes, I think that analogy has always stuck with me.
Well, as the little brother to 3 older brothers, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I'm going to release you from this jury because obviously, if your background and such and what you know about the case puts you on the not fair or not impartial. Most people would try and be fair, but if you can't be impartial, we understand, and I'm going to release you from this jury. So,
Thank you.
all right, and you don't have to worry about being called up on other juries because your jury service is done. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was caused by the court. I may go a little more on this next juror myself. I may go more on this juror myself, so. All right, if you can have a seat right there. Good afternoon, you are juror 121, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. I'm going to go through a couple things before I turn it over to the attorneys. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So raise your right hand, please. You swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror.
Yes.
All right, thank you. A few things. You filled out a questionnaire. Thank you for doing that. Gives us a lot of good information. Everything in that questionnaire correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, when the attorneys are asking you questions, there may be some things that come up that you realize, oh, I probably should have answered that differently. Maybe my opinions have changed. Things like that. And they will probably read you the question and the answer, not to be confrontational, but just so you know what you actually said. But as you sit here right now, any changes or additions that you can think of?
No.
All right. At some point, it may come to you that, oh, there is something I should have put in, or that was inaccurate, or my opinions have changed. If that happens, we're fine. In fact, I hope you feel comfortable saying something different than what was in the questionnaire. Okay?
Sure.
Now, the questionnaire also advised you that since you're a potential juror, that you should not read any articles, avoid the media about this case. Were you able to do that?
Yes.
Now, we also recognize that the media is publishing a lot about this case. And it's been a couple months since you filled out the questionnaire. Have you been exposed, even inadvertent information about the case, a related civil case, pretrial matters in this case, anything like that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Nothing you can recall? Okay. Are you a news junkie or not a news junkie?
I wouldn't say I'm a news junkie, but I try to just kind of check out articles.
Okay.
Just kind of go through so I can see like what is happening in the world.
All right. Just kind of on a daily basis, look through the headlines, see what's interesting.
I wouldn't even say daily. Maybe every couple days I'll just kind of scroll through.
All right. Pretty much on the internet, or do you get the?
Yeah, on the internet.
Okay. And you're scrolling or checking every now and then. See any headlines related to this case or related civil case, anything like that?
Not that I can recall. No.
Okay. All right. The important thing is that you decide the case only on what you hear and see in the courtroom. You cannot base your decision as a juror on something you may have seen elsewhere.
Right.
In fact, everybody who comes in here has some knowledge of the case. Some more than others, some more accurate than others, at least based on what we know. Can you put all that aside and put aside any opinions you have formed, which are okay? It's all right to have opinions. Sure. The only question is, can you put them aside and be fair and impartial?
Yes.
Okay. You did have an answer to a question. Any reason that you could not be a fair and impartial juror in this case? If yes, please explain. I do not believe so, unless following I before E laws is a disqualifying factor. Anything else?
I'm sorry, what was that?
In answer to number 9, is there any other reason you could not be a fair and impartial juror in this case? If yes, please explain. And it talked about I before E, that you're a violator of the I before E law.
Oh.
Recall putting that down?
No, I don't.
Okay, you are juror 121, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any reason why you could not be fair and impartial in this case?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And work? Sounds like your work is monotonous, so this would break up your routine.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Without telling me where you work, or we don't want to get too much identifying information. What is your work, or what do you do on a daily basis?
It's a warehouse for retail.
All right. How long have you been working there?
Just over 3 years.
Okay. All right. And you can be sequestered overnight, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. You did say you wanted to serve on this jury.
Correct.
How badly do you want to serve on this jury?
I mean, kind of, honestly, kind of half and half.
Okay.
I do because it's, it'd be really interesting to be a part of it, but at the same time, it's kind of high pressure, so.
Sure.
There's that aspect as well.
All right. I'm just looking for our bottom line question, which is question number 10 in part 1, which basically says in a very wordy manner, can you be fair and impartial? And you said yes. Tell me why. Why do you think you'd be a good, fair, and impartial juror?
I guess just kind of generally speaking, I really like to look at both sides of arguments. I consider myself to be fairly unbiased towards things. I mean, I do have opinions, certain opinions about things, but just kind of in a general sense, I like to hear both sides of an argument and try to, I guess, remain as centered as possible.
All right. Okay, this trial is going to be 4 weeks. Can you make that work?
Yes,
And did you recognize any of the witnesses on the list?
I did not.
All right. Well, then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson. As to Juror 121, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
Thank you for your time and patience here today and for filling out the questionnaire. I'm going to ask you a series of just kind of general questions first, and then I'll come back to your questionnaire and ask you some follow-up if that's okay.
Sure.
Again, we're not trying to trick you. We know that it was a while ago that you filled this out. I'll read you the question and what you wrote.
Okay.
Okay. If you and I were to meet under different circumstances, some sort of social event, what are a couple things I learn about you during that conversation?
I probably learned that I really enjoy music. I do a lot of audio production. I do some film production as well, just as a hobby. And I like to write and just kind of, I guess, try to keep up on philosophy and social issues as much as possible.
Okay. So a pretty creative guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. You had obviously heard about this case before coming in and filling out this questionnaire, right?
Yes.
And fair to say you formed some opinions about this matter.
Correct.
And ultimately, you then received the packet in the mail indicating that you were a potential juror in this case. What was your reaction, your initial reaction to that, to learning that?
I guess surprise.
Okay. Why? Why would you be surprised?
I guess it just, well, I mean, one, I've never been selected for jury duty, and also just because of the like how well known the case is and how I guess how big the case is.
Okay. Did you have any concerns about your personal safety, family safety, COVID, anything of that nature?
No, I can't say I have.
Okay. When you came downtown and saw the government center today, what was your reaction?
I was just kind of unsure of where to go and how to gain access to the center.
Right. It's a little fenced off these days, right?
Yeah, a little intimidating with all this going on.
I mean, obviously, like the military is here. There's lots of police officers. I mean, did that cause you any concern, or did it make you feel safe?
I guess I don't. I guess it made me feel just a little nervous, just because the added security. I didn't know what to expect. But I mean, other than that, I guess I kind of expected to see higher security and that sort of thing. So.
Okay. How about when you heard that we're doing what we can to protect your anonymity?
I guess I just I found that to be understandable.
Okay. At some point, your name may be released when the judge determines that it's safe to do so.
Sure.
So, does that add any added layer of reassurance?
I guess I'm kind of ambivalent about it. I don't really have an opinion.
Okay. Can you think back in your personal or professional life and kind of determine or think about a time when you had to resolve a conflict between two people?
Yeah, I can think of a couple times, I guess. I guess it would be either specifically between maybe two friends that were having an argument. I definitely tried to almost play rough in that situation. I try to be like the middleman and like hear both sides and everything. I really don't like conflict, so when two people that I know are having an argument, I usually try to interject myself in the middle and just try to be sort of play peacekeeper. I've also had similar situations as a manager in fast food and having to deal with maybe employees that have had arguments or differences, and in that same respect, I also try to just be the peacemaker in that situation and get people to just relax and not be so heated about things.
Ultimately, you know that there's a pretty significant conflict here, right?
Yes.
Between the state of Minnesota and Mr. Chauvin.
Yes.
And that's ultimately what your role would be, is to resolve that conflict.
Right.
And in the jury room, you know, you're one of 12 people, and conflicts may emerge within the deliberation process.
Right.
How would you envision your role, you know, being as a kind of the mediator, peacekeeper type in that situation?
Well, I would just try to make sure that both parties respect what the other party has to say. You know, giving each person, or allowing each person to have you know, enough time to talk and get their point across, or their viewpoint across, without the other person trying to interrupt, and just, like, you know, allowing them to hear each other out, and just trying to keep tension and frustration at a minimum. Just making sure that everybody tries to remain logical and not let their passions get in the way of their judgment.
Do you think it changes the analysis if you're in conflict yourself with one of the other jurors?
I'm sorry?
So rather than you being the mediator and observing conflict between two people,
Sure.
what if you're involved in the conflict yourself? Like, what if you disagree with a group of jurors?
I mean, I guess I just try to be as respectful as I can in my own disagreement. You know, I generally don't tell people that they're wrong for having their viewpoint, or make them feel that they're wrong. And I try my best to hear out somebody else, even if I don't disagree, and a lot of times try to see things from their point of view, and not allow myself to not be maybe swayed by something I hear that I don't agree with, instead of just writing it off completely, but actually, like, keeping it in my head and, like, going over it and possibly even allowing that to change my opinion. Yeah, I guess I just try to be respectful and hear people out.
Okay. I suppose, again, in your professional life or in your personal life, you've been called upon to try to determine if someone is lying about something?
I guess I can't remember a specific experience.
Sure. I mean, do you think that that's kind of a normal process that we as humans engage in? Is this person telling me the truth?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I've definitely had to make that call, like, personally. I can't say I've ever, like, had to play a specific role, but I definitely had to judge whether or not somebody was lying to me.
How do you, what tools do you bring to that analysis?
I guess I don't know what specific tools. I guess body language, trying to read body language, I think is a big indicator. And just logic, just kind of, evaluating the scenario, and yeah.
Do you think that, how do you think consistency of story affects that analysis?
I think it does, to an extent. I guess it really depends on the events. I know over time people's memories can change, and with that their story might change slightly. But it's usually smaller details. Obviously, if there's a major detail that has changed, that might be an indicator that their story is untrue.
Okay. Do you think that a person's perception may change over time?
Yes, I do.
Do you think that a person's perception may change based upon information that they receive over time?
Yeah, I do.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you think it's possible for two people to perceive the same event from the same vantage point and come to different conclusions about what they see?
Yes.
Why?
just because I guess everybody kind of processes information differently. What they see, you know, their sensory input. There's no way to know that how one person processes an event is the same way that another person does, just because we can't see things through their eyes or hear things through their ears, so their brain might just interpret the set of events differently.
Is that based on like their environment being raised, or do you think it's based on education and training? Like, what types of things do you think would affect someone's perception of an event?
Just the things that they look for, I guess. You know, some people might be paying attention to certain things, while some people might pay attention to other things. Like maybe one person will notice, you know, what somebody's wearing more so than another person, while the other person might be paying more attention to, like, maybe the scenery. So I guess we just kind of seek out different things in our environment.
Okay. So ultimately, you understand that if you were to be a juror on this case, you have to judge this case based only on the evidence as it's presented in court. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And anything that you may have learned about this case before coming into this courtroom or filling out this questionnaire, you have to basically, in a sense, erase it from your memory.
Yes.
Can you do that?
I think so, yes.
Will you do that?
Yes.
Okay. At the end of the case, the judge is going to give you the law that applies in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to decide the facts based upon the law he gives you. You may read the law and you may go, that can't possibly be right, or we really need to work to change this law, right? You may disagree with the law.
Sure.
Can you apply the facts of this case to the law as the judge gives it to you, even if you think it should be different or is wrong?
Yes, I can.
Just want to follow up with a few questions on your questionnaire, sir, and I'll try to make it relatively quick. It's fair that you had formed some pretty strong opinions about this case, right?
Yes.
And again, I don't question your the right for you to have your opinions, but we need to make sure that you can set those opinions aside and that you can be an impartial juror. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right. And so by me asking you questions about your opinions, I'm not questioning your thought process. I just want to make sure that we're getting true and honest answers.
Sure.
Okay? Mm-hmm. All right. You or I believe at the beginning when the judge was asking you for some questions, you were asking, or you had a response that referenced bias, right? That people have to recognize their own biases, I think is what you said.
Okay.
Do you recall that generally?
I mean, honestly, I don't remember everything that I wrote, but.
Okay. I mean, and that's fair. I mean, it's a little bit unusual to be under the spotlight, so to speak, right?
Sure, yeah.
I guess the question is, you know, you formed very strong opinions about this case,
mm-hmm.
and you have to be cognizant of your bias, right?
Yes.
And our biases and our opinions will form how we view kind of what we were just talking about, how we view or perceive events.
Right.
Because your opinions are so strong, do you think you can honestly think you can set those aside and judge this case exclusively on the facts?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So you were asked a series of questions about what you recall, what you had communicated with other people, and various videos that you had seen. I want to make sure we're talking about the same video or videos.
Sure.
There was a bystander video that went viral.
Mm-hmm.
There were some body camera footage that was released, and then there were some store surveillance videos that were also released in the public.
Okay.
Do you know which of those videos you saw or recall seeing?
Yes, I saw the bystander video and the police cam.
The body-worn cameras?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And you watched those. Did you go online and like watch the entirety of those videos, or did you watch like clips and pieces that you saw in the news or on social media?
I believe I watched the entire videos. I know for sure the bystander video. at least I think it wasn't from like the news. It wasn't like clips, but it might have been. It might have been like cut in certain spots. I can't remember. And I think the body cam video, I might have like skipped through it. I don't know if I watched the whole thing beginning to end.
Okay. Now, you were then asked, you think you had seen these videos 2 or 3 times, right?
The first one, yeah, a couple times. I think I only watched the second one once.
The bystander you saw a couple times?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. And you may have just watched the body camera footage, one time, kind of skipping through it a little bit.
Right, I believe so.
Okay. So you were asked to kind of write based on what you had seen and heard, your recollections of the case based on your exposure to this case in the media.
Yes.
And you wrote a pretty lengthy explanation that, and I'm going to somewhat paraphrase because there's a few things I want to ask you. You understood that Mr. Floyd may have made a purchase with a counterfeit bill. That's why the police were called. When they arrived on the scene, you wrote, Floyd appeared distressed according to the witnesses, but did not resist as he was placed in handcuffs and led to the squad car. So my question is that your impression of Mr. Floyd's behavior based on your own formulation of watching these videos, or your own opinion watching these videos, or are you relaying what other people have communicated?
I am basing it off of what I have seen from the videos, yes.
Okay. So you had formed an impression or opinion that Mr. Floyd had not resisted arrest?
Correct.
Okay. You were ultimately, you wrote about Mr. Chauvin having his knee on the back of Mr. Floyd's neck, that he stared into the camera but did not respond. The other officers at the scene also did not react. For about 8 minutes later, Floyd fell silent and unresponsive. Chauvin eventually took his knee off of Floyd's neck, but at that time, Floyd was dead. So have you formed an opinion as to what the cause of Mr. Floyd's death was?
I guess not. I have heard a couple things. I have heard that it was maybe due to his airway being closed because of the knee. I've also heard other things about a possible drug overdose. And I guess what I believe is that maybe it was a combination. Could have been a combination.
Okay, because you do reference that an autopsy report stated that Floyd had been under the influence of fentanyl. And you wrote, you've got some arrows here, so I have to follow. Body cam footage that was later released revealed that Floyd had been put in the backseat of the police vehicle moments before ending up on the ground beneath Chauvin's knee. Floyd had appeared distressed, but unarmed and cooperative, apparently suffering from a mental break. Do you recall writing that?
Yes.
Okay. And again, ultimately you understand that I'm not questioning your intent, right?
Sure.
It's the presumption of innocence applies in this case. Do you understand that?
Yes.
That means that right now Mr. Chauvin is innocent.
Correct.
And the defense has no burden to prove anything. We don't have to call witnesses. We don't have to introduce evidence. We don't have to ask a single question. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
And it's not the defense's burden to prove anything to get you back to the presumption of innocence and then make the state hold the state to its burden. You understand that?
Yes.
That's not the nature of our law. And you can do that.
Yes, I believe so.
You were asked about your opinions or general impression of the defendants. At the time it was all 4 officers, but you wrote that you have a very negative impression of Mr. Chauvin, and you wrote, I feel that Chauvin used excessive and unnecessary force and that the other officers should have at some point intervened. So it's fair to say you formed an opinion that what you saw in this video constituted excessive force.
Yes.
Again, you understand that the police procedures, police training, police use of force, all of that may become an issue in this case.
Yes.
And so again, recognizing our biases and where we have to start from being the presumption of innocence, you can put all of your previous assumptions aside, start from zero, listen to the evidence, and presume Mr. Chauvin innocent.
Yes.
You were also asked if you had ever talked about this incident with your friends, family, coworkers, discussed it online, etc. And you wrote, "My opinion was that his death was the result of excessive and unnecessary force by Chauvin and a lack of intervention from the other officers involved." Right, so it sounds like you formed an opinion that Mr. Chauvin caused Mr. Floyd's death.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. And again, right? I mean, you understand, do you understand why I would be concerned?
Yes.
You were asked whether you believe the community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place since Mr. Floyd's death. And you wrote both positively in the sense that it raised awareness of the potential cases of police brutality, and negatively in the sense that it has created divisiveness in people's opinion about the protests. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, obviously there have been a lot of ways in which things have been negatively affected with riots, destruction of property, businesses being destroyed. So there's that side of it, and also, like I was saying about the divisiveness, it's really hard for people to sort of come together and talk about things without being passionate about it or arguing about things. But at the same time, I also have seen some positive things in the community. I've seen a lot of people sort of coming together. I guess actually having, there have been plenty of open discussions about it, even though there has been a lot of divisiveness. People have been actively talking about it and trying to understand other points of view. And I do think that, there might possibly need to be awareness if I guess general kind of awareness of what is happening, I guess, in the police force, and just, maybe a potential reevaluation of how things are done and how things need to be handled in the future. So it is kind of drawing attention to that and raising certain questions about how things should be done.
Okay. There were a series of kind of broad statements, and you were asked to rank your opinion as to each of them from strongly agree to strongly disagree on a scale of 1 to 5. I just want to ask you about a few of them. The question reads, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you strongly agreed with that. Why?
I guess just from what I've just things that I've read and seen. I guess it seems to me that a lot of blacks and minorities tend to live in lower income areas, and I usually tie lower income areas as having more crime and therefore being more heavily policed. And just because those areas tend to have a higher concentration of black people and minorities, I do feel that there is a little bit of a difference there in how often or how much more they might be policed and how they may be dealt with differently.
Okay. The statement reads, I support defunding the Minneapolis Police Department, and you somewhat agreed with that. Why?
I do think that there may be certain things that need to be changed. I guess as far as defunding goes, I think I don't believe so much in defunding as possibly reassessing how funding is distributed, and maybe seeing if there's different ways, different areas that certain funding can go to, as far as maybe creating different programs or funding other programs, better funding for other programs and that sort of thing.
Okay. Now, the statement reads specifically, Minneapolis police officers are more likely to respond with force when confronting black suspects than when dealing with white suspects, and you somewhat agreed with that. Can you explain why?
I guess I just certain videos and things, certain videos, certain articles, certain things that I've read that people have said and experienced.
Okay. I mean, and it's specific to the Minneapolis Police Department?
I guess I wouldn't say specific to Minneapolis.
Okay.
I might have missed that.
So, I mean, ultimately you understand that this case involves the Minneapolis Police Department in a significant way, right?
Correct, yes.
And one of the questions here is, local police departments try to cover up excessive force rather than correct it, and you strongly agreed with that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I did, yeah.
Okay. I mean, why do you, what do you base that opinion on?
I guess I guess I kind of see that in a lot of other places. A lot of, I guess in a lot of government situations or business situations, a lot of times it just seems like it's in a certain group's best interest to kind of maybe sweep certain things under the rug. Things that might involve a lot of money, or having to restructure things, or just might give something a bad image. I don't think it's specific to just police departments, but in a lot of organizations, just it might complicate things or hurt financially, or give something a bad image, and therefore a lot of things can be swept under the rug.
Okay. So, in this case, obviously, you may hear testimony that is called by the state,
Mm-hmm.
and or the defense, right? And these witnesses may be Minneapolis police officers.
Yes.
Do you give credence, to a police officer called by the state versus the defense?
No, I don't think so.
Do you think that an officer who may be called by the defendant would be more likely to be trying to sweep this under the rug or try to make his department look better?
I don't think so. No, not not on an individual level. No.
Okay, but on a collective, you do?
Yes, I think it's entirely possible.
And so ultimately, if you were to hear testimony from police officers, can you give that testimony the same credence as just a bystander?
Yes.
You can keep them at the same level?
Yes.
Even though you think that you would be more suspicious of police testimony than a citizen?
I don't think I would be any more or less suspicious.
Okay. But if you have this impression that police officers are trying to, or police departments are trying to sweep things under the rug, right? Isn't that a suspicion?
Like I said, I don't think I would just apply that to specifically a police department. I think it's generally just human nature in any kind of organization for that sort of thing to happen.
Okay. Now, I want to remind you that you have the ability to ask for a private hearing, and I know there's some questions about some past experiences you may have had with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Are you comfortable talking about that publicly, or would you prefer a private session?
I think I could talk about it publicly, yes.
Okay. So you have a prior arrest yourself, right?
Yes.
Okay. And were you arrested by the Minneapolis Police Department?
No, it was the Apple Valley Police Department.
Okay. And do you feel that you were treated fairly by the Apple Valley Police Department?
I do.
I noticed that there's another question that you responded to, saying that you were put in handcuffs and ankle bracelets. Is that the incident that you're talking about, or was that something else?
Yes, that was the incident.
Okay. Were you put in ankle bracelets by the police officers or in like the jail context?
By the officers.
Okay. So were they concerned? Were they concerned that you were obstructing or resisting their efforts to arrest you?
Yes.
Okay. And were you charged with obstruction of a legal process as well?
I was not.
So when you say that you were put into handcuffs and ankle bracelets, were you, that was during the time that they were arresting you?
Correct.
All right. And were you transported to the police station in that fashion?
Yes.
Okay. And you were ultimately charged with some crimes, the DUI crime, right?
No, I wasn't charged at that time for any crime.
Okay. But did you get something in the mail later charging you with an offense?
No, I didn't. I guess the reason that I was, I was arrested mainly for missing a court date.
Okay. So they gave you a court date, you missed a court date, they came and picked you up on
Right. I mean, yeah, there was a reason, there was a different reason that they were called, but I did have a warrant out, which is why I was arrested.
Okay. How long ago was this?
I would say 9 years ago, maybe 8 or 9 years.
Okay. And again, in terms of how you were treated by that police department, either at the time of your initial arrest or when you were arrested on the warrant for missing court, is there anything about how the police treated you that biases you against police officers?
No, not at all.
Okay. You were also ultimately had to go to court, deal with a prosecutor, things of that nature, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you retain an attorney to represent you, or did you go in and do it on your own?
I had a public defendant.
Okay. Do you think that the court system treated you fairly?
I do, yes.
Do you think that the prosecution treated you fairly?
Yes.
All right. And so there's nothing about that circumstance that would in any way, again, affect your impartiality towards police officers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, etc.?
No, I don't.
Because you were asked a question about your belief in the criminal justice system, and you were asked the question, do you believe our criminal justice system works? Why or why not? And you wrote yes and no. I believe that our criminal justice system was created with the best intentions and it works well in theory. However, money corrupts even the best of intentions. So are you suggesting that people who can afford more expensive lawyers get better justice, or what are you inferring here?
Yes, I would say that, in the sense that money is involved, I do think being able to afford a